So a very good evening and a very warm welcome to everyone present here. Today, as part of the Empower series of the Placement Unit, we have a session on product management, which is a super hot, super trending field these days. So I take this opportunity to welcome and introduce our speakers for the day. We have with us Amol Dalal, a recent graduate in M.Sc Mathematics plus Mechanical, placed at Flipkart, and he has interned at CRED and Microsoft in the past. The second speaker for the day is Ananya Malhotra, who's a recent graduate in Electronics and Instrumentation and is currently placed at Flipkart as well. She has interned at EY and NITI Aayog in the past. I request Amol and Ananya to please take forward the talk. Thank you.
Hey everyone, this is Amol here. I hope I'm audible. Can someone confirm?
Yes, you're
Awesome.
audible.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, hey everyone, thanks for joining on a Saturday evening and really happy to be here. And I think what we'll be covering today is basically, how do you crack an entry-level role into product management right out of college, right? And given the hype that the field has been having for the last couple of years, a lot of you may be having questions as to, what product management is and what do we do as PMs, and finally, like, how do I land this role? So that's what we're here, right? You may have heard a lot of information out there, but we're just here to sort of demystify some of the myths for you, as well as answer your questions and share our experience preparing for product roles in our final years. So without further ado, I'll just share my screen. Yeah, is this visible? Yeah, Vinayak, is my screen visible?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I think as mentioned, we'll just talk about how do you land an APM role right out of college, right? Breaking into product management, and the general consensus or what we have heard mostly is that you can land these roles, out after an MBA, or you see a lot of MBA grads or software engineers transitioning into these roles after a while. However, I think with the interest of PM rising rapidly in the last 5 years or so, now companies have become more have openings for undergrads as well. And that's what we're here to sort of help you guys out with. So yeah, I think I'll just give a short intro about myself. So I'm working as an APM at Flipkart. I joined very recently. And as mentioned, I was a dualite in bits. I had math and mechanical engineering as my branches. Prior to this, I interned with the product team at CRED, and I had a data science stint at Microsoft. On campus, I was a part of Bosom Spons. I served as a COSACN, and I was also a part of 180 Degrees Consulting, where we basically have worked with a lot of socially conscious organizations to drive positive impact. So that's just a bit about me. And apart from that, I spent a lot of my time in colleges, watching football. I'm getting into F1 recently. I love reading. So yeah, I think that's just a short intro about me. And moving forward, so I think what we'll discuss in the next 1 hour is, understanding what product management is about, an overview of the hiring process, how do you prepare for product interviews and what does it entail, and how do you solve cases, which is a core part of your PM experience, interview experience. We'll share our learnings from when we were interviewing with companies, right? And we'll also help you guys out with what resources may come in handy when you guys sit for placements either this year or next year, right? So that's what we want to cover in a concise fashion. So yeah, I'll just start with what PM is about, right? So in my definition, product management is basically a cross-functional role where you're responsible for the success of a product. So now you may have heard like a lot of definitions, but this is a simple one-line explanation which just very beautifully encapsulates what the field is about. And what you do as a product manager is that you are responsible for like a particular product, right? And now what do we mean by products here? So some examples of everyday products include like your physical products, right? It can be something like an iPhone or your headphones, or even say the smart speaker at your home. It can be apps or websites, something like when you're watching Netflix, there are dedicated product managers taking care of various charters or features within Netflix. Even say if you're checking your bank balance on Google Pay, right, that has a dedicated product manager. Or if you're watching something on YouTube, if you're browsing LinkedIn, checking your Gmail, right, Bitsmail, everything has every product has a dedicated PM for it. And while the first two are consumer facing products, you also have products that are business to business, or which powers the technology that for all the say products we use every day. So these are not visible to us, but then you also have dedicated PMs making meaningful impact in these areas. So an example is basically cloud-based solutions for hosting websites or scaling your company's resources, right? So Azure is one example. Or even if you're making any payments, right, how does the payment stack work? So powering online payments. So Stripe is a great example of a backend product. So these are a few examples of what are the different products around you, which have product managers really taking care of the entire experience and working continuously hard to improve them year on year. So moving on. So I think coming to the main question, right? So I think we have heard this term so many times. So like, what does a product manager actually do? So the first thing that you do as a product manager is you're solving for your customers' problems, right? You may, so I think more often than not, whenever we explore products ourselves, we find certain issues with the product that we do not like, or we feel that the experience can be better. And you often find a lot of app updates or websites being updated with time, and that's what PMs are doing. They're basically improving their product with time, and basically with the sole aim of making the experience for your customer better. So one of the core tenets of what a product manager does is product thinking, right? That is designing innovative yet feasible solutions to solve problems for your customer. So an example of this can be something like when Flipkart entered the e-commerce space in India. A very good problem that that was there to be solved was that there's a very low trust among users in India, right? And people were not willing to pay first, and then because they were not sure of the quality of the product that would arrive at their doors. So something like cash on delivery was started, right? That's an entirely new thing that was started for the first time in India by any e-commerce company, and it helped a lot in terms of really building that level of trust, as well as accelerating the adoption of e-commerce in India. So it's it can be any sort of small innovation as well as something very grand, right? So like how the iPhone in 2007 was completely new. It just sort of transformed how the way we use our smartphones. So any sort of innovation that you're doing to really solve for a customer problem, I think that's what a PM's main job is. This also then involves building products, right? So it's not limited to just ideation where you are defining this is how the product should be. But then it also involves you working together with various stakeholders to drive the successful launch of a product. And when I say who are you working with here, so these include your software engineers, your data scientists, data analysts, right? Even folks from marketing, operations, customer support, business executives, right? So it's a lot of people, and more often than not, it depends on the scope of your product. But building products is also a key part of a product manager, right? And I think if I just go back, I had highlighted two things, right? It's a cross-functional role, right? And where you're responsible for the success of a product. So when you're building these products, the cross-functional aspect comes into play because you're the one who is aligning your entire team and coordinating with them to ensure that your product is meeting the standards from a business perspective, a tech perspective, and from a customer perspective, while also ensuring that everything's happening on time. So that's where as a product manager, you're really the one who's sort of gluing the team together, aligning them, and motivating them to sort of get it done across the finish line. So it's a very exciting role where you get to interact a lot with different stakeholders, as well as really brainstorm at the same time, come up with new ideas and solutions. And the third part is improving products, right? So I think this is something I touched upon before. So while you are building products, it's not that your job as a PM is done once the product is launched. So this also means that you will continuously look at your customer feedback, right? Are they liking the product or not, or what is or just looking at data, how are your metrics holding up? And metrics are basically any sort of indicators of how your product is doing, right? So something like if your how many users are coming on your app every day, or how much revenue are you able to drive in. So these are a few aspects of what improving products can be like. So you're looking at data and customer feedback, and then you iteratively try experiments, right? That okay, if certain thing is not working, can I run a small experiment on my website, show a different website to say a small segment of users, and see if there's any tangible change. Or you'll start releasing minor fixes and improvements. So that's a continuous part of building for the customer. So I think this is like in a very fair way what a product manager does. Of course, there are many more responsibilities, and you can always check them out. And I think main part is that what do you like? Okay, so we understand that what PM is and what does a PM do. But then out of undergrad, what are am I eligible for it? What is the various criteria for me to break into PM? Or it's very confusing, right? Because we hear about how consulting is supposed to, you have the entire resume building for consulting, or for software roles you need to have done certain courses in college, right? So we have the same expectations here, that how can I in my second or third year start working towards PM. So good news is that there is no branch criteria in applying for a PM role. There's no GPA cutoff. There's no prior PM experience needed out of undergrad, and no coding skills are required. So I think that's good news, right? It's not that you need, if you did not make up your mind about product management very early on in your college life, that that does not mean that doors for you are closed. And so then again, at the same time, since it's a hotly coveted job, right, there are also a bunch of skill set requirements that are expected out of you. So I'll just cover them here. So when you talk about landing a PM role, there are mainly 5 things that are super critical. That is, are you a good problem solver? Do you empathize with the customer? Do you have a good design sense? This basically means that when you're building a product, are you able to incorporate the customer's requirements and present it in a succinct way, in a sense that it makes sense from a business standpoint and is also feasible to implement. And one more option, or one more sort of skill set that's important here, is that are you a good communicator? And this means 2 things, right? So number 1 is alignment. That's an important job of you as a PM, right? Since you have to ensure that your product is being launched within time, it may require a lot of persuasion or alignment from your team, right? And at the same time, you'll also have to translate the requirements, right? So say your business team may say that we are expecting certain revenue numbers or certain engagement numbers from this from your product. But then when you're talking to an engineer or a data scientist, you will basically have to break that problem statement down and convey the relevant parts of information to them. So this is the entire communication aspect, where you are the one who's keeping your team up to speed on everything, as well as ensuring smooth working processes between all of them. And I think the 5th one, I think this is the most important of everything out here, that is having a strong curiosity to learn. And in PM, right, so it's not just that it's not like a gen role where you're just sort of coordinating, right? You'll also need to learn a lot about how technology around us is constantly evolving and is being incorporated into products, right? An example can be something like the rise of AR recently, or how ML has been a part of all products recently, right? So you have to be up to speed and catching up or keeping up with the latest technology trends, and always be on the lookout of how can you really solve for the customer when with the help of these technologies. So I think that's just a strong curiosity to learn that really helps you move forward as a PM later on as well. Moving forward, I'll just touch upon what the hiring process is like. So typically for most product management roles, you may have one of the following interview rounds, if not all. So we'll talk about a deck submission round. This is something that we had in the Flipkart process. We'll also have problem solving rounds. This is typically asked in most of your product openings, as well as a product thinking round. And the fifth is a technical interview. So these were the 5 rounds we had in the Flipkart process last year. Although a disclaimer is that the product the process may vary slightly moving forward. So without further ado, I'll just move forward here. I'll just take a quick pause in case there are any questions so far. Ananya, are there any questions?
You can address the ones that had popped in earlier. I'll just read it out to you.
Yeah.
So, what are the disadvantages of being an APM?
Oh, okay. Right. So I think so I wouldn't I think some people may look at this as a disadvantage, but then I think it's sort of like I think it's something which helps you learn faster. So as an APM, you have a lot of ownership and accountability, right? And you are the one who's responsible for a particular feature or product. And more often than not, you're the young kid on the block, and you have to align everyone. And a consequence of this is sometimes that your learning curve is very strong in terms of stakeholder management. And so more often than not, you will become very used to the fact that you will have to take responsibility if things don't go right, as well as, you'll have to ramp up very quickly when it just comes to delivering on time, right? So you'll have a lot of responsibility. And while it may be a bit difficult to get started early on, but your learning curve will be super exponential, and it will help you a lot, as you start out.
Right, Amol, there's one more question that you might want to address.
Yeah.
The question is that there are several APM programs that accept applications internationally, like Google, Facebook, Uber, Twitter. Any suggestions on landing these international roles?
Got it. So, so I am not sure if they take folks from India. At least as per my the last time I heard about these programs, I think it's only open to US and UK. Although my understanding here may be slightly mistaken, but I think you can always give it a shot. There's no harm in trying. And the processes for these programs is actually same as Flipkart, right? So we'll talk about the Flipkart process, and they involve the same rounds that we spoke about earlier, right? That is your problem solving and product thinking rounds. So preparation for them is more or less the same, although we'll be talking more in an Indian context so far. But then you can always find great resources on how interviews for these companies happen. So we'll talk about resources at the end, but then you can find a lot of mock interviews online. And another point to add is that while I think Google and Twitter, I think, for example, take freshers, Facebook, for example, requires WorkX to be a part of this RPM program. So just just check that before applying once.
I'd also like to add to what Amol has said. He's mentioned it very correctly. But there are a few other factors that might really play a role in your selection for international programs, and that is your GPA. You need to maintain a good, decent GPA. For international universities, it's usually around greater than 3.5 and 4, but that translates to around greater than 8 for Indian context. So you might want to maintain a good GPA if you want to apply for international RPM programs.
Yeah. So cool. I think I'll just move forward with just talking about the process that we went through when we sat for Flipkart, right? So I think the first round that we had for shortlisting was a deck submission round. And what's even interesting here is that a lot of startups these days, right, before even setting up interviews, they give you some sort of a small assignment. So you more often than not, you end up making a deck on some problem statement, right, before you reach the interview process. So I think deck submission is something that's becoming a very good way to sort of start your interview process. I think it's widely adopted now. And so the problem statement, so what I'll do is I'll just talk in the context of the problem statement we had last year, right? So the problem statement that was given to us for shortlisting was that they wanted us to discuss about a product that we have used recently, with which we found a problem, while using, and what are our proposed solutions to improve the product, as well as talk more about, say, the pitfalls or advantages of a solution. So I think in an essence, your deck submission round covers the 3 aspects that a PM job looks for, right? That is customer empathy, right? Are you able to really identify the right problem? Number 2 is problem solving, right? Are you able to propose a good solution? And the third is, of course, your design sense. Is your is your solution, number 1, feasible, and number 2, does it make sense from a business standpoint as well, right? So just to give an example, right, I think If, for example, let's just say if you are building a product to combat fake news in WhatsApp, but then if it requires WhatsApp to go through the chats of people, then it breaks their end-to-end encryption wala funda, right? So that's in contradiction. So you wouldn't want to do something like that. So that's what I mean by feasibility here. So I think these are three things that are tested for broadly, and on the basis of your deck, you're shortlisted for interviews. And like I mentioned before, a good thing about PM roles is that there are no spikes in your resume that are being looked for. ऐसा नहीं है कि you need to have done certain things to be eligible for a shortlist, at least in the Indian context. And it all comes down to how well have you done your deck, right? How well are you demonstrating all of these skills? So I think 3 pointers that really helped us was that we were very passionate about the problem or the product that we chose to ideate on. We, of course, like a bare minimum requirement is that you are answering all the questions asked, right? So you will have like a bunch, like you'll have 5-6 questions that may be asked out of you in the deck round. So just ensure that you're covering all your bases. And the third is, of course, that how you present your deck is also super critical, right? So you wouldn't want to cram all information on like a bunch of slides where it's difficult for the interviewer to figure out, okay, what's happening, right? Like, where do I start? And it should not be like an information overload, but at the same time, it should not be empty. And any sort of visual cues to make your deck stand out really helps you. So I think these are 3 basic pointers you need to keep in mind. And I think just talking more about the first point, right? So things that I think the North Star metric for you in the deck submission round is that, are you able to go deep into a problem? Number one, right? Are you able to think of all first order or second order effects of your proposed solution? Are you able to identify the right problem, right? So these are super critical things. And more importantly, one more thing you need to be cautious about, or I think not cautious about, I think one more thing that you can try striving for is that how do you make your deck stand out, right? So a good way to do that is pick a niche product or something that not everyone is doing, right? So for example, a lot of people may make decks on YouTube, right? So you can always try doing something different here, right? Choose a problem statement that is not very common or is not known to everyone. So or just adding elements to your deck that helps it stand out, right? One more thing that helped me here is that more often than not, a good part of PM's job also involves validating whether the problem statement that is being solved for makes sense or not. So what helped me was that whenever I was thinking of ideas, I would always bounce them around with few of my peers or family, and just get their feedback on whether it's a good enough problem to be solved for or not, and whether the proposed solution makes sense. So I think that's getting feedback informally from your circle will be super helpful, right? Because finally the PM is like the custodian of the customer, right? So if you're not catering to the needs of people around you, then of course it sort of won't work out. So I think that's a good exercise you can always try out when preparing for the deck submission round. Moving forward, this is so once you're shortlisted for the deck submission, through via the deck submission round, you will have your case interviews, right? And these case interviews are somewhat similar with your consulting case interviews, but then there's also a fair share of difference. The commonality being that it requires some level of structured thinking or approach, while the difference being that these are very product centric, while your consulting cases are more surrounding entering new markets or acquiring another business, etc., etc. So the first type of interview that you have in your PM interviews is a problem solving case, and the objective here is to identify what is the underlying root cause impacting the success of your product, right? So imagine the scenario that let's just say that you are a PM at YouTube, right? And you just see some of your metrics that how many users are watching YouTube daily, what is the average time they are spending, right? And so on and so forth. And then you see that one of those metrics is not right. So then of course you'll understand that something's wrong, right? And as a PM, it's your job to diagnose the issue as well as improve it, right? So that's what a problem solving round tests for. So why it is important, right? So now this is important because you'll have a lot of data to work with in a typical PM role. And your products will be super complex. So it's not that it'll be something very basic. You'll have so many data points, you'll have so many features. So it's difficult. So it's very important to understand or identify what is a hidden problem in your product, right? If your metrics are not holding up, and your metrics and your customers are your source of truth. So this requires you to sort of really dive deep into what is the available information make a lot of hypotheses and really approach in a structured manner. And so, yeah, I think talking more about what are the skills being tested here, it is basically structured thinking and your understanding of metrics. So I think, like, since I'm talking about, like, since I spoke about YouTube, right? So now users spending less time on YouTube, this could be a potential problem statement that comes to you. And now possible reasons here are like immense, right? It could be a problem with the recommendation algorithm. Maybe YouTube is showing you different videos on the homepage, right? Or maybe a data scientist is trying something out and you see that it's not working. You may find that, maybe number of ads has increased. So like, as you guys know, YouTube usually has 2 ads now. So that may have annoyed the users. It could have been like, creators maybe migrating to TikTok or some other platform. So your favorite creators no longer actively pushing out content. It could be UX changes. It can be so many more things. So basically, this is where your structured approach helps, right? Because now there could be like 10,000 reasons, but you have limited time to like really, look at all reasons and see whether it makes sense or not. So this is where having like a MECE approach that is mutually exclusive, but, completely exhaustive, this helps, right? So you basically look at it horizontally that, okay, what are the different aspects of YouTube? What can be the potential problems? How can I break this problem statement down? Look at high level metrics there and then dive deep into whatever seems suspicious. So this is more about, like how do you think in a very structured format. Second is more surrounding understanding of metrics, right? So what you'll also notice in your PM case interviews is that the problem statement will more often than not be very vague. And that is where you will seek the interviewer's help to clarify the problem statement better. And this is where, so like, for example, if, an interviewer tells me that Uber's revenue is falling, right? So, I mean, this is very vague, right? So I can break revenue down into, what is the average revenue per customer into number of paying customers, right? So that gives me a good idea of, at a very simple level, of what revenue is like. So if say my total paying customers is decreasing, then I'll probably, look at factors like, okay, external market mein kya ho raha, is Ola, for example, offering better, better rides at cheaper prices, or is it something to do with like, an app store issue, or is there some government regulation place? There are like so many reasons possible here, right? Or users are having a problem signing up. While, if it's like something like, average revenue per customer is decreasing, then it could be other factors at play, right? Maybe their first ride experience wasn't good, so they're not willing to sign up again. So this is where breaking down or getting an exact sense of what your metrics are really helps. And I think the sort of the key learning from both of these is that you'll have to dive deep and you'll have to, make your problem statement as specific as possible, right? Because if you keep it vague, then it's difficult to really, narrow down on what might be the problem at hand. Just taking a quick pause. Let me just see if there are any questions.
Yeah, we have one question. The question is, what are the subject academic knowledge one needs for a role in PM as a career option?
Got it. Okay, so yeah, I think I'll also clarify that, right? So academic knowledge or subject knowledge per se, there's nothing you need to know. So I think your PM case interviews is like, basically the metric on which you're being you're being judged if you're if you'll be a good fit for the role or not. But we'll also talk about the fact that some of these rounds, right? So for example, if it's a deck making round, right? So rather than you thinking like some 2 days before the deadline that okay, what are the problems with the products, or what are the different products around me, I think having a curiosity about of the products around you, as well as being curious about technology, since these like that is what's powering your products, helps a lot. So I think just exploring new products on your phone or on your laptop, or just reading up on product blogs as well as tech blogs really helps. So we have also added some of those links in the resources section, so we'll cover that then as well. But yeah, apart from that, no academic knowledge is required. I think it's more about how often do you practice your case interviews, and how quickly are you able to learn from each one of them. So quickly moving on to the next type of case interview, that is your product thinking round, right? So problem solving is basically to diagnose an issue. But then as a PM, like we mentioned, the main job is to, of course, build products, right? So the objective here is to see that, are you able to design products that customers love? And what are the skills being tested here? So again, your problem statement here in your product thinking round can also be super vague. So I think I'll just show an example, right? So for example, if you guys may have heard abhi news mein, there is like, it's sort of making waves that Netflix wants to enter the gaming space, right? And now this is very vague, right? Because gaming can mean something from like, Ludo that you play with your family members to something as sophisticated as, like your games on a PlayStation or an Xbox. So that's where product thinking like, helps, right? So what you will be given is a very vague problem statement, but then you'll have to ask these questions. You'll have to ask a bunch of questions, right, to really help narrow it down. And so what are the skills being tested here? That is defining the scope of the problem. So this is getting clarity on, okay, why are we doing this? Why are we building this product? What problem are we trying to solve? Empathizing with the customer. Who are our customers? What are their requirements? Are they not being met? And if they are not being met, why so? And what are the gaps in the current market, right? And third is, of course, prioritization. So this means that, you will also want to solve or build for like a lot of users, right? And you'll have a lot of possibilities, right? There are different ways you can go about building a product, but then you'll always go for the one that requires the minimum, like the least time and effort, while also maintaining optimum quality of the product, right? And the reason is that when you work as PMs in organizations or startups, you won't have unlimited bandwidth when it comes to your engineering team or any of the other teams as well. So you'll have to be very conscious of how their time is being utilized and try optimizing for it. So it's basically like a fine balance between delivering a world-class product as well as ensuring that you're not blowing your team's budget just out of the park. So that's what prioritization is about. I think that's super important even in your case interviews. And the fourth is again design sense, right? So as mentioned, you'll have to take into factor things like ease of use, feasibility of your product, as well as does it even align with the company objectives, right? So yeah, I think so. Like since we talked about Netflix, right? If it wants your help as a PM to design a gaming product, these are some questions you can ask, right? Why are we building a gaming product specifically? Why not something else? Who are our target customers? Are we looking to say acquire new customers? So let's just assume that if people from the age of 15 to 30 watch Netflix a lot, right? Are we trying to, acquire, say, a younger audience, say, launch Netflix for kids later on as a hook, or even older folks, right? What customer problem are we trying to solve? Is it that, I'm unable to acquire new users, or, like my growth has slowed down, or, is there a problem with retention? It could be like a bunch of problems that you're looking at here. What value are we adding with the product, of course, right? So this makes sense, because if your product is not adding value, then there's no point wasting so much time and energy on it. And the last thing mentioned is the product feasible from a company standpoint. So this is what the product thinking round is about. And you can have various other problem statements, right? And it's actually easy to even come up with one, right? So if you want to just like get a flavor of how a product thinking exercise works, like, right? So you can just come up with something on the spot. So something like should Facebook have a jobs platform, right? So you'll have to think about, okay, what does LinkedIn not offer today, which Facebook can do better. So it's things like that. Or for example, should Spotify enter the OTT market, right? Since they're already into streaming. So you can come up with like a bunch of problem statements. It's a fun exercise, very honestly. So yeah, I think this is what the product thinking round is about. So you'll definitely have problem solving and product thinking skills being tested in more or less every PM interview. And yeah, I think there are like a good number of case books that help you prep, get up to speed on how to solve these problems. So we'll also cover that, in a bit. Yeah, and I think one more round that at least that we had in the Flipkart process was getting a flavor of technical understanding, right? So, and the reason is this: the reason behind this is that as a PM, you're always working with technology, right? You're building products that operate with the help of engineers, right? You're like, it may be a website, it could be even like a hardware app, right? But then it requires a lot of sophisticated technology inside. So that's where, since you're working with engineers, you need to understand sort of how the products work as well, right? Like it's not all UX, or it's not all about how the button should look like or what should the user flow be like. So it's much more sophisticated than that. And especially if you're like working in a B2B space, or if you're working on a backend product, which is like super important, right? Let's just say if you're working for Razorpay, for example, and if you're working on their payment stack, then it's important to understand the technological nuances behind the product. So that's where this is the round that sort of gauges your familiarity with the technology. Although I must say that you don't need to be scared of this round in particular, because you're not from a CS background, or because you've not done coding before. So it's not a hardcore knowledge that is being looked for here, where you are supposed to have you need to know Python or Java or something. It's more of a conceptual understanding, right? So that while you're not coding it out yourself, you can at least get a fair idea of how your product stands in terms of reliability, scalability, for example, right? And yeah, why it is important, I think I've covered, right? Moving on to skills tested, so you can expect questions on knowledge of system design. So this basically means that an example of this is is how does WhatsApp show that the other person's online, right? So it's much more sophisticated in saying that if the other person's online, that means it's online, right? So basically you may have a service where your last online timestamp may be recorded with the status as well, right? And whenever the other person's checking your profile, your phone is making a request to that server to basically get that information back. So that's how it's all powered, right? There are certain features and services in the backend which is storing all the data and presenting it to the desired stakeholders whenever a request is made. So that's like a very high level understanding of what system design is like. You can get more sophisticated problems here as well, right? Something like maybe how does your mailbox work, right? So it just can be anything like that. It can also be projects mentioned in your resume, right? So if you have done any tech-centric projects, you can expect questions on them, right? If you've worked on ML, data science, or even just like built a compiler or something, like you just expect questions on them. Understanding general technical concepts is key. I think this is like the bare minimum that you need to know. Example is what is the function of APIs, right? So API stands for an application programming interface. So an example is that, just say if you're opening Uber today and you want to book a cab, right? So now it basically uses GPS to show where your cabs are. But then usme they're using Google Maps as your to show where you are located and where your driver is located. But for that, there is an API. There's an Uber ka API that's communicating with Google Maps ka API, and they're getting the the desired information with the help of that. So that's like a fair understanding of what APIs are like. And another example of this is that you may have also found that when you're logging on to say third-party websites, you may get an option of continue with Google or Facebook. So that's where an API also comes into play. So you like various things here and there of what are the different sort of generic tools and technologies that are powering our everyday businesses, right? Another example could be how does UPI work, for example, right? Since everyone uses it. So I think this is about technical understanding, and this is something where there is no designated way to go about it. I think it's more about you being curious, right? I think like I mentioned about products and technology in general, right? So I mean, you can just be curious about, okay, for example, if I'm placing an order on Swiggy, right, what's happening in the back end, or if I'm booking a flight, right, what is Make My Trip doing in the background? So it can be anything as broad as that. So I think, or even something like, how does machine learn, what is machine learning, right? Or what is blockchain, or what is crypto? So I think as long as you're curious about technology, you should be more or less, good. Yeah, I think these are the 4 rounds that we had in mind. I'll just take a quick pause here for additional questions, and then I think Ananya will present.
Right, I was mute, sorry. We have one question. How many, do more companies come for PM roles in SEM 2 and SEM 1? Maybe you can also mention the companies that come for PM roles in Pilani.
Got it. Is Advait on the... Yeah.
I think we asked him that question. Yeah, Advait.
Advait, would you like to take this, or should I only answer? Okay, I think he's...
I think you can take it up.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm not sure of, say, like the SEM 2 versus SEM 1 sort of distribution, but I think usually the trend is that you have more non-technical roles in semester 2. So I think general trend is that you have more business analyst, consulting, and PM roles in second semester as opposed to first. Flipkart is an open role, so you can apply irrespective of whichever semester you're on. A few examples of like roles that have come in the past, at least like during my placement season or before, our Axis Bank, Mecmoca came a few years back. Park Plus is a very exciting startup that came last year. So you have a lot of startups coming through placements. I think you can expect 4 or 5 companies. I think that's the ballpark number that was there during my time as well. And you also have a lot of startups that you can apply to off campus as well. So that's what a lot of folks have done. So I have a bunch of friends at CRED as well, right? So they converted it off campus. So a lot of opportunities, I would say. And yeah, to answer your question, SEM 2 is, I think, a safer bet if you're looking for more PM opportunities.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Amol, if you can stop the presentation, I'll present the deck from my laptop.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys.
Just let me know when my slide is visible.
Yep, it's visible.
Yep.
Good. Hi, everybody. First of all, I'd like to really thank Amol. The entire speech was really insightful. Now it puts me in a dilemma as to what I should speak about because he's already covered everything so comprehensively. But we'll start with the introduction. So I'm Ananya Malhotra. I have a bachelor's degree in electronics and instrumentation. I graduated this year. I'm working as an APM at Flipkart. I have had internships with PwC, Ernst & Young, and NITI Aayog in the past. And I have, on campus, I was associated with Department of Sponsorship and Marketing, the Debating Society, and Athletics and the Swimming Team. Before jumping into the preparation strategy and how to actually solve case rounds, Amol has already covered the different rounds and the requirements of different rounds separately. But here, I would like to cover how to solve any case round in terms of, it could be a consultant case round, but it's like more or less focused on product management case rounds. But you can actually follow these tips and tricks to actually get yourself structured and understand the ask of the examination. So, right. Before we get into the preparation strategy, I'd just like to maybe give context of PM a bit, like what I understand of PM. So basically what the person who was trying to explain product management to me said that a product manager is basically the CEO of a product. She or he takes the product from the ideation stage to the maturity. He or she looks at the metrics, maybe in the end decides whether to scale it up or to withdraw it altogether. So why is product management such an exciting field? Why is it so hot these days? So it's majorly because it gives you a vast area of opportunities. First of all, it's ownership. You get a lot of ownership to build a 0 to 1 product, and you get to get your hands dirty and work from it through the entire funnel. And working in a company like Flipkart or maybe like Dunzo, Zomato, other companies that offer product management roles, it really helps you create an impact. A few decisions you make can actually impact the financials of the company. So it is really exciting to know that you can actually create that sort of impact with your decision and your decision making. So I think there were a few questions on the chat regarding real life examples as to what product managers really do. Amol has comprehensively covered as to what product management entails. I would just like to add as to the real projects that our seniors are working on. For example, Anushka, right now she's associated with groceries at Flipkart, and she is responsible for customer profiling, both quantitative and qualitative. Asim, another case would be Asim. He's my buddy. He's also working at Flipkart, and he's in charge of the insights charter in the ads team at Flipkart. So he's basically responsible to bridge the knowledge gap between the click-through rates and the customer data. So these are the small kind of problems that you might be working on as APMs, PMs. So yeah. So now we'll get to the preparation strategy. And before the case rounds, for the Flipkart interview, I just like to speak a little bit of the deck round. Like it's the bottleneck. Like your entire preparation will go for a toss if you are not able to clear that deck round. So it's really important for you to give in that amount of time and to put in, like, the devil is in the details. You need to pay attention to making your deck stand out. Amol rightly mentioned as to the various ways your deck can stand out. A few of them I'll add. So your deck should represent you. Like it is the only item that's representing you in front of the person who's scrutinizing, who's the recruiter basically. So it should speak for you. It should actually demonstrate that you have the capabilities and the capacities of a product manager. What they might entail would be you need to have a great knowledge of your domain. You need to have a design sense, more or less, and you need to know how to sell your idea. So that's really important. Okay, so this is about the deck. I'll quickly move to the preparation strategy and how to solve. And for this, foremost, I'd like to start with an anecdote. So during my interview preparation, for the first week, despite going through a grueling process, doing a lot of case interviews, there was a constant feedback that I got that I'm not like it doesn't seem structured. Get more structure into your case. So I was trying to be structured, but it didn't come across like that. So I was really upset. I went to my mom. I started ranting, why is this happening? So she was like, let's do a case. And I kind of laughed because I thought that she might not, be able to understand what product management might entail. But the case that she gave me was, I call them the Rajma case. So she gave me a case that your brother did not eat Rajma today. Get to the root cause of it. It might sound very trivial, but then I approached the question. I started throwing a volley of questions at her. Maybe there's less salt, maybe there's more salt, maybe it's not hot enough, maybe it's cold, stuff like that. And after like taking a step back, I realized that there are only an n number of reasons for the problem. Like you don't have to rush it. You have to calm down and keep it very simple. So basically, you have to, like, from this entire practice, I understood that you actually have to mold your strategy according to the information that has been given you. You do not have to address it through all tangents. You have to be very single-minded in how to approach the problem, and that has to come through your prompt. Okay, so this is where we come to the second strategy, which is pass your problem through a funnel. At every stage, your problem should evolve. It should, you should unravel the problem. You should ask questions, clarifying questions, preliminary questions, and it should evolve. Your entire problem should evolve. Right. So in the process of like, what does it mean to pass your problem through a solution? I'll give you an example. For example, you are the prompt might be, you're a product manager at Flipkart, and the revenues have gone down. Okay, so you have to unravel this problem. What do you mean by revenues? Does it mean the average price has gone down, or does it mean the number of units that people are buying has gone down? So basically, you keep asking questions to open up the problem. You don't make it more complex, right? And for this, what you might need is to know your 3CP. 3CP is basically knowing your customer, knowing your company, knowing your competition, and knowing your product. So these four things, like, you must make sure that you have a good hold of all these four before you delve into your problem. And this is something that you will do through your preliminary questions. Make sure that they're precise and keep it brief. Yeah. So another point here would be, you're supposed to ask sharp questions. For example, the prompt might be, okay, let's leave the prompt. If what I mean by asking sharp questions is, I'll give you an example. You can ask a question like, okay, so the engagement you can ask the interviewer, has the engagement on this page gone down? That's a poor question. Don't ask this question, because engagement can mean like multiple things. It can mean session time. It can mean click-through rates. It can also mean maybe like, I mentioned session time. Okay, so it can mean other things. So basically, don't ask these random questions. Ask something very specific. For example, on this page, have the number of people visiting this page gone down? So this way, the interviewer knows whether to answer in a yes or no. Don't put the interviewer in a dilemma, because the easier you make the job for the interviewer, the easier your chances will be to get, in his or her good books. Okay. So the next point will be think out loud and probing questions for the win. Like, when you think out loud, don't ramble, just think out loud in a structured way. This will help the interviewer direct you into the direction that he wants you to go in. So this will actually help you. And you can also work with this by asking probing questions. For example, I'll give you an example from my own interview experience. I was asked a case on Twitter, an RC on Twitter, that the engagement had gone down. So after I had figured out where the problem really lied with respect to the click-through rates, I asked the interviewer, should I approach it? Like, I would like to approach it by segmenting the problem from an external and internal kind of factors way. So, and then I said, I'd like to approach it through the internal first, and then I'd like to see the external. But then he actually prompted and guided me that he doesn't want me to go to the internals part at all. He wants me to maybe list down what the external factors might be. So it will help you. It will it will help you that you do not have to retrace that extra effort. So you should ask probing questions. It will help you in your interview. Yes, this is a very important part. You have to be tutorable. By tutorable, I mean that this is something that I actually found very wrong in a few of the cases that I was doing with other people. Like, they wouldn't catch on hints. And I think that is a major drawback. It's a very rookie problem that you should not actually try to be very strict with what your framework is. You should understand the ask of the interviewer and slowly mold your way into that direction. Okay, so this point, to prepare for talking, you're supposed to prepare for talking points. By this, I mean that your interview is not only going to be about the case, it's also going to be 10 minutes before the case and 10 minutes after the case. So this is the time that you can actually leave an impression on the interviewer. What you're supposed to do when I mean prepare for talking points is that find something that's interesting about you, something that really interests you and you would be glad to talk about it. For example, in my own interview, I spoke about US elections. I also spoke about women in tech. I spoke about my own city, Lucknow. So it just creates a vibe of, it increases the inclination of the interviewer to like you more. So that's so the last point would be have a thick skin. Okay, this point is very relevant when it comes to the preparation part of the interview. You need to be like, this is something that my seniors told me, you need to be shameless in terms of you need to keep pestering or keep asking your seniors and your buddies to give you sessions, to give you will be scene zone, you will be said, okay, I don't have time, and you have to keep pestering them to give you that time, because those are the people, they're not getting paid extra to tutor you, but you have to make sure that your mentoring happens in the right way so that you are cut out perfectly for the room. So make sure that you spend as much time as possible in preparing for case interviews, doing it with people, because that helps much more than reading ever would. So these are the 8 points that might really help you solve case rounds. Now we'd come to the learnings from my own interview experience. So there's this loop example that I had read somewhere, very interesting. So basically, every stage in this process, and in most process for product management rounds, would be elimination. It will be based on elimination. So consider it like that you have, like we had 6 rounds. Every single round is like a loop, and you have to cross through each loop. You cannot just overshoot on one loop in terms of, okay, I'm very, very good at this round. It might just make me through because it will cover up for the rest of the rounds. It doesn't happen like that. You have to make sure that you cover each, like you step through each and every loop. And that is the only thing that will actually, pass you through that entire process. So there's another thing about the interview experience. What are the expectations out of you? Like, what does the interview expect from you? Now, having started work at Flipkart and interacting with those people firsthand, it is really insightful for me to understand what are these people actually expecting of the interview. And I noted 5 points, which I found one in common with all the people who actually got through this APM program, and also the things that I've seen common in the cohort at Flipkart. So the first one would be high energy. You need to be enthusiastic. Like, you need to have the energy to convey your idea and, raise the energy of the room. So I think that is one. Second would be your command over communication. You need to be able to communicate your idea in a succinct way so that, so this is something I mentioned earlier as well. You need to be able to sell your idea. So communication is key when it comes to that, and you need to be very adept at doing it. The third one would be you need to be an interesting and an interested person. You need to be both a good listener and you need to be able to, demonstrate that you're interesting. So incite interest in you, right? The fourth one would be curiosity. You need to be curious about things. This is something that is common across boards for a lot of things. It is something that will help you learn more. And when I mean by curious, it also helps in interviews a lot. For example, like in my own interview process, there were in my first round, there was a question, a very unique question that he asked. And to curiously ask about that question, even the things that didn't matter for solving the problem, I think it left a good impression on the interviewer, in my opinion. So that is 4. And the 5th would be attention to detail. I think the more detailed you are, the more inclined you are to get to the problem. It will help you prioritize. It will help you delve deeper into the problem and solve it eventually. The last one would be, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like, I have been through this placement cycle. I have seen excellent people who were really very good, who for one reason or the other couldn't get to the place that they had, the coveted sort of place that they had hoped that they would. So this is an advice that do not put all your eggs in one basket. Just the way we diversify our portfolios in the equities market, you're supposed to diversify the opportunities that you're seeking. Product management should be just one of them. There could be multiple other opportunities that you might want to look at, because right now, when we're preparing for product management interviews, we're basically preparing to be good problem solvers. And this is an essential skill. So a lot of job profiles think that this is a very pivotal skill for them. You might want to look at other job opportunities as well. So that was it for the interview process and everything. Now I'd directly come to resources. There is like an abundance of resources that you might want to look at. It's available in the market. So for design, you might want to, for designing the deck, you might want to work on Canva. I personally think it's my favorite. Figma is also great. For a little bit of inspiration, you can go to Behance, Dribble, Unsplash. And FreePick is great for vectors. That was something suggested to me by my seniors. For case solving, you can actually look at these 3 books, but I would still I would mention that no matter how much you read, it is imperative for you to do cases with your friends, with your peers. I personally did around 5 cases a day. It was a little hectic. I'd say that it you should spread it out a bit. It was a little hectic to us, but doing cases with your friends is the thing. Friends and buddies and whatever will help you eventually get better at problem solving and case prep. For technical understanding, I think Amol mentioned about system design. Gaurav Sen, I think is important. For example, okay, I'll give you an example. Like if somebody mentions, if your question is, can you explain how the red feature works on WhatsApp? You just can't say that the other person opened his WhatsApp and checked the message, that's why it's red. No, you are supposed to speak in that jargon of tech. You're supposed to speak how the device is actually sending a request to the server and how it's receiving the request back through WebSockets. So you're supposed to be a little more tech-oriented in that sense. Swipe to Unlock is a very breezy read. You can just, in a day, you can sit and you can go through it. Actually, this is, everybody should read this book. It's really interesting and it will open your mind to a lot of things. When it comes to mock interviews, you can actually look at Exponent, although there is a fallacy here because it's very US centric. So you might want to not just look at it. It's great. It's the people are really talented. And they do good, they solve their cases really well, but take it with a pinch of salt. It's not very inclined, or it doesn't refer to the Indian context as much. Because I started from scratch, I refer to Victor Cheng videos, and it is for consultancy preparation, but it will give you a hang of guesstimates and market entry cases. So for people who are starting from scratch, I think this is a great place to start. Crafting cases again for market entry cases. Newsletters, you can, okay. So this was the essential stuff, like mock interviews, technical understanding, and all the books. But now comes the part for the people who are really enthusiastic and really curious about product management. You can actually sign up to newsletters at Ken Hustle. There's TechCrunch also, which sends great newsletters regarding business and startups. So you can look at these newsletters. With books, I didn't read any books regarding product management. This is by Amol. I think it really helped him, so you can actually look at it. You can also check my blog. This is not a publicity thing, but I have written a few interview experience blogs, so you might want to read that when you reach the interview process. And thank you. I think we are done here. You can actually reach out to us and we'll be really happy to help.
Yeah, guys, just hold on. We'll just take questions. And I think before we move on to questions, Ananya, could you just share the last slide once again?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible. Just go a slide. Yeah. So I think one call out here is that, so while Exponent is very centric towards, like how PM interviews happen in the US, Appraised and the product folks are, Indian communities, which actually get, PMs working in Indian startups as well as, large organizations for mock cases. So do check those out. I think those can be your first sources of reference for like how a typical mock case works out like. And of course, like, the secondary step here is doing these cases with your friends as well as your seniors, right? So that actually helps bring the practical experience when it comes to ramping up your knowledge of how to approach these cases. But yeah, just to call out, there's like a slight error. So yeah, I think we'll just start with questions. Yeah. Awesome. So I think one question that is was asked is that before applying for a PM internship, right? Is it absolutely necessary to like the product and believe in it? And if yes, how do you approach the entire process of finding products you love? So it's a very simple answer, right? Like try as many products as you can, right? Install products you've never thought of using, give it a shot, right? Go deep into a product, right? So for example, there is for example, one of the products I liked a lot was Reddit, right? So I just like dove deep into it. So what are the different communities, what makes it stand out, right? And I think it's more about just being a strong user of these products. So whatever product you find yourself spending a lot of time on during the day, I think that qualifies to be a good product because it's taking all your attention and energy. So I think like if you're stuck, just go to your phone chat, right? Look at what apps are taking your day. So I think that's a good way to start, right? And of course, like coming to your point as to for a particular startup, do I need to be interested or invest in the product? So I get that it may be difficult. So for example, if it's something like Razorpay, right? So I mean, you won't naturally be passionate for say the product there, right? Because I mean it's something backend, but then I think it's more about also thinking from a customer perspective, right? So there may be certain issues with when you're making payments, or even if it's some other company, for example, right? Even though you may not be a direct consumer of it or somebody who loves the product, I think just looking at it from customer lens, right? Getting feedback from people as to how their experience was. So I think an example is that one of my friends landed an internship at Tanjo, and this was in his third year, and we were all in Pilani, right? So I mean, we didn't have Dunzo available, but then to land the intern, of course, like he reached out to like a bunch of seniors, got their feedback on the product, right? And then it's a very beautiful exercise because you have context as to what are customers not liking, and more often than not in product management, you'll also find that you are not the customer, right? It's somebody else. So you have to always think from their lens. So it may not be a product you love, but it can also be like a problem statement you would like to solve for. So I think it's a broad umbrella term there. And is it necessary? I would say yes, especially in startups, mainly because I think like we discussed a few times, right? Product management requires a lot of ownership, a strong bias for action. That is basically, taking initiatives yourself, getting things done, right? And that naturally comes if you're like very passionate about solving the problem, right? It's difficult to manufacture that if you're not invested in the product in some sense, right? So maybe you don't love the product, but then at least if you're keen on improving it, I think you'll make for a very good fit at a product for an intern role, for a PM intern role at any company. So yeah, I think I hope that answers your question.
Something I'd like to add here, Amol. When you not to the question, but as a whole, when you mentioned about looking at a lot of products, I think that really helps in the product thinking round. Like when you look at a lot of apps and you look at a lot of the features that they've introduced, they're really they've been really tackled really well. So for example, you can look at features like iTunes. When there's an iTunes app, you click on the bubble and the bubble grows, the preference grows, and there are more preferences that pop around it. So interesting aspects to problem solving and product thinking can really you can arrive at those when you are looking at different products that are actually mature. So you can actually give that a shot as well. It'll help in your interview process.
We have a question that is, what products features are we working on? So I mean, we have just started, so it's early days for us. So maybe once like sometime later, we'll definitely let you guys know what we're working on. There's another question. Flipkart APM role comes to campus, but what are other good APM programs that you guys are considering and have heard of apart from those at startups, right? So I think in terms of large organizations, the APM program is still relatively new. So Flipkart is one big organization that offers this role. Another I've heard of a relatively new organization. Ananya, there's some disturbance at your side. Another program that I've heard of is at Ola. So Ola is also fairly big, and they have a dedicated 2-year APM program. And we also have Bitsyans working there, so you can definitely check that out as well. You also have startups I think like majority of others are startups, right? So something like a Ninja Cart, right? Hotstar is one. You can have something like Neo, right? So And I think you'll find like a lot of bitchins working everywhere. So I think that's like a positive aspect to it. Dunzo's, of course, like, one of the startups, FAMPay is another, right? So yeah, I think I think majorly it's startups. I think for MBA folks, they have more opportunities in terms of large organizations. So, but yeah, I think rest assured, like your learning curve everywhere will be like, super exponential. And you have a lot of smart folks working like, in all the like leading startups of the country, and, as well as the large organizations. So like the APM program is a good place to be, I think, very early on in your career. And one more question is APM now versus as software engineer to PM later. Which one is better in terms of impact and influence that you have, and which one is easier? So okay, I think I'm not a software engineer, neither is Ananya, so I don't think it would be fair on our part to draw comparisons. But then of course, like there are merits to both to each of the roles, right? So while APM sort of helps you a lot with say stakeholder management, really becoming good at problem solving, shipping products, right? So a transition to PM role from an APM role is of course easier. But then say if you have your own targets that you want to achieve with software engineering, right? So with a software engineer, you can sort of achieve levels of depth or knowledge of technology that no other role will offer you, right? So if that is your goal, then of course, like, a software role, could be a better fit for you. But I think a good thing about product management is that, like, you can always get into it. So even after 2 years of software engineering, you can, transition to a PM. A lot of folks have actually done that, right? A post MBA can also get into software, into product management. You have a lot of ex-consultants, even from MBB, who are working in coveted PM roles right now. And yeah, so I think it's up to you, right? So if you're not sure about PM, and if you already have your eyes set on something else, do give it a shot. But yeah, it's like the doors of PM are always open for you, is what I would say.
True. That's true, because like yesterday I was speaking to a director who has like 20 years of experience, and 15 years of his experience is in a tech role. So he actually migrated from a tech role to a PM role after 15 years of his job experience. So that's really exciting and interesting to, like, you can actually gravitate to this role whenever. So it's
and I think one more thing, like it also reminds me. So like a number of product managers, if you actually look it up, right? So some of my managers have actually done a CA and they have transitioned into product management. So I think it all depends upon what are your objectives, right? And I think personally, like the APM program as well as my product interns has taught me a lot, and it's a like you learn a lot, right? You learn a lot about the customer, and you basically get exposure to a lot of things, right? So it's not just like sort of your UX or UI. It's also like a fair understanding of how technology around you is working, right? How are we incorporating that technology to solve for problems, as well as you get to interact with designers, machine learning engineers. So it's a whole lot of stuff that is there for you to sort of consume and really grow in terms of knowledge. And then of course you can then sort of become a subject matter expert in a particular domain of products, or lean towards say a certain type of product, right? So maybe if you want to do enterprise tech, then your knowledge of MLDS, or even say sort of backend development will be super important. So that way your options are very open. There's also one more question about what is the division of responsibility among the various members of product teams. So okay, let me put it this way, right? So usually you have so like the typical hierarchy in like in a mature product organization involves like an APM who is basically someone fresh out of college or an MBA. Then you have a product manager, which is then followed by like a senior product manager, and so on and so forth. Then you have like a VP, and then like a chief product officer. And what you can see basically is that as an APM, or like in very early on in a career, you will have complete ownership of one or two features, right? So an example can be, जैसे मान लो, hypothetically speaking, Facebook पे you have 5 tabs, right? So there is something called Facebook Watch, there's something called Friend Request, there's one on notification. So as an APM, you'll get ownership of a small part, of a particular page. Then like you'll have a PM who's probably handling a bit bigger chunk, but it's still like sort of restricted to a certain section. And as your responsibilities grow, or like you will also find that your charter is increasing. So you'll have PMs reporting to you. So you are looking at, so like there may be just like a product manager for the Facebook app, for example, right? And you'll have a lot of PMs reporting to him or her, and who will be basically owning various features or subsections within an app. So that's how it works. And with more experience, you'll have like larger responsibilities.
Yeah. So there's one more question. The question is put up by Sarthak. What are the timelines involved in the APM selection process for Flipkart? And when is the call for deck submission usually announced? And by when do the students know that they've been selected? Okay. So it's a very okay. So it's like for us it varies from year to year. So for us it happened in the end, like the position opened in the end of September. We were supposed to make a deck. We took 15 days to make the deck. The deadline for the deck was 1st October, and within 15 days we got our deck shortlist. There are around for our year it was 25 people were shortlisted out of the number of applicants that had tried in our batch.
Yeah. Also, I think moving forward, right? So, what skill sets are looked upon when we apply for a PM internship? So, this is the same as your entry level roles, right? So, there's no differentiation there. Same core concepts, although your process may not be as formal, right? Depending on which company you're applying to. Where can I find problem statements for practice? And I hope we have covered this. So, there are 3 good case books that we talked about, right? That is preparing for product interviews, Decode and Conquer, and cracking the product interview. I think that's what it's called. So you can refer to these 3 case books. They are super helpful. And yeah, mock interviews are also like a good reference source. How can we access this slide? Okay, I think we'll try working this out with PU. We'll try getting this across.
Okay, another question is, it's interesting. I think the both of us should answer this. How did you realize you wanted a PM role? Would you like to take it first? I'll take it after that.
Yeah, sure. How did I realize that PM is for me, right? So I think for me, I did not make up my mind very early on, right? So it was in my pre-final year that I was convinced that I want to do product management, and I found myself over the last couple of years, right? Trying my hand at consulting, data science, trying core engineering also for a change, right? Or also exploring design. And what fascinated me was that I was curious about all things, and what finally I realized, when I spoke to seniors, was that product management is a role where you're getting exposure to all of them, and you're really solving for a consumer problem, right? And I think I was super inspired by what how Apple has evolved over the past couple of years, or even something like Stripe, what Stripe is doing today, and being able to make the same impact as a PM was what excited me, right? Being at the center of a product, while also having getting exposure to different aspects of the product and making it successful. So I think I like that aspect. And yeah, I think I just love the fact that you have a lot of ownership involved, and yeah, it's a strong learning curve.
Yeah, I like that. For me, I was actually on the opposite end of the spectrum. Amol identified that he wants to go in product 1 year in advance. I started considering product management as a viable career option only after the deck shortlist. So it was basically I was tutored by a few of my seniors to actually push for this role. I was actually working on a personal project, and I did not intend to sit for placements at all. But they told the same thing to me. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. You need to diversify your opportunities and not waste your potential in any which way. So it's always, and now looking at it in retrospect, I think it is a very good fit, because I have my interest diverse. It's all across the board. I love to work in design. I have this inclination towards tech. Business is also something that I'm really interested in. So at the intersection of it, we have product management, and I think that's why it's a really exciting career option for me.
Yeah, I think we'll just quickly wrap up other questions as well.
Yeah.
Other APM programs available for undergrads. I think we have answered this. Do check out Uppraised. I think they have a few APM stints. So I think they're doing something dedicated. Check out case competitions as well. Taking part in case competitions. TPF is a good resource again. Be on the lookout there. What product did you work on here for APM deck submission? We are not allowed to share that, so I'm sorry. But nevertheless, I think I think it's unique for all of us. So I think if there's a personal touch to it, just be curious about products around you. Think deeply as to what you can do better, and I'm pretty sure you'll land at a great problem.
Right. I'll also like to add something here. I have looked at the decks of a few people who actually made it through other colleges, and something that I found in common, I think both of us have mentioned it before, was that not only were they interested in the product, but they also demonstrated that they're interesting people as a whole. Like they could, in some way or the other, incorporate humor into their deck. And I think that's really important, because if you can make the person reading your deck laugh or smile through the process, I think that person's more inclined to liking your deck. That person's more inclined to remembering and having a memory of the deck with her or him. So I think that's another point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think just a few more questions left. So, how much knowledge of finance do we require for the APM role? None. So don't worry. How many opportunities are available on campus in terms of number of students that get selected? I think PU will be like the right person to answer this, but I think it's still fairly new in terms of on-campus opportunities. I think you can expect 10 to 15 people every year who are landing product roles. Off-campus, I don't have a number, but then all that I can tell you is that's scaling very massively.
Yes.
Considering placements are very new, what must one do in the last 10, 15 days to be ready for APM role? I have been doing consulting case prep over a week, but would like to develop a product role. So I think, so for me also, like, I had some prior exposure to consulting, but then I did not really start my case preparation in advance. I adhered to like the structure that the program had, the APM process for us, and it was very well designed in the sense that you'll have a lot of help, you'll have enough time to like ramp up. So I think since you already have a consulting case background, I think you will have developed a structured approach. Just refer to the case books, start practicing cases. The more you practice, the better you get. And yeah, I think you can really ramp up in a month's time. You can become an expert if you're doing your cases regularly. And yeah, I think that's about it. It's not rocket science. It's fairly easy. I think as long as you are dedicated enough and you're learning from each of your mock interviews, you'll be fine.
And I think there's an additional benefit that you get if you're like not tethered that way. Going in, like I went into the preparation untethered, and there are benefits, pros and cons of it. The con is that you're crunched. You'll have to do a lot of case prep in the last 15 days. But the pro of it, the benefit of it might be that your buddies will really help shape you, and you will not have to unlearn any wrong practices in the way. So unlearning a wrong practice really takes a lot of time. So it's better that I wouldn't say it's better, but I think it's okay if you just have like 20-30 days for preparation. It is sufficient.
Yeah. I think one last question that we have. Does participating in competitions and building your portfolio in this manner help when applying for an off-campus role? Also, do you think it also helps when preparing for on-campus? I think that's the question. So I think there's no resume-based shortlisting, right? But then at the same time, you will of course have like a personal interview, right? Where they talk about your interests or what have you done in college. So it's a great way to showcase that you're a good problem solver, because finally your case competitions are all about that, right? So like, for example, I took part in a case competition in my pre-final year where we were solving for a growth strategy of a major car rental player, right? So I think that was super interesting, gave us a fair exposure to product, right? We had to build like loyalty programs and all. So it's a good talking point, I would say, for sure. And of course, it helps you stand out, right? If you've done well in a case competition, like it helps you differentiate from like, typical resumes where, like a lot of people usually just focus on coursework. So I would say it's a strong learning experience, which also like, not only adds value to your resume, but also prepares you better, to develop like the things we talked about, earlier today. So it's sort of like a long-term process of building your product thinking and problem solving abilities. And a case competition is a very great way to do that. I would definitely encourage, you guys to take part if you have time.
Right. I think this is something that Anushka, our senior, also mentioned. She also encouraged us to take part in case competitions, because like these are the things that will give you those talking points, right? Like it will help you actually interact and make a memorable experience with the interview. So I think it's a good way to interact. So you should go for it.
Awesome. I think we are done. So again, like, it's 8:20. I think, yeah, we're just on time, but yeah, I think thanks a lot for the questions, guys. I think these were super interesting questions, and more importantly, wishing you guys all the best for your upcoming placements or internship season. Do feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional queries, right? And we'll be more than happy to help out. And yeah, lastly, I think, just hoping you and your families are staying safe back at home, difficult times, but yeah, hoping things get better.
Yes. Thank you so much, Amol. Thank you so much, Ananya, for taking our time for this super insightful and super helpful session. I'm sure every one of us here has more clarity on the domain and has benefited from this session. I wish you both all the best in your journey at Flipkart as well.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much, Vivek, Vinayak, and Pranav as well. This is super helpful.
Yeah.
Great. I think we can end the session now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys. Bye.